Hey everybody, it's Kirsten. Today I am finally delivering the video that I promised about how to best access your rotation and improve your turnout. This is something that everyone in ballet has to work on, no matter what body type you have, no matter how much natural rotation you have. I mean, it definitely comes easier to some people than others, there's no doubt about that. I was certainly one of those people that had a very hard time, and I still have a hard time with turnout. In fact, I was born pigeon-toed, so I do feel passionately about this subject and about helping other people who struggle like I do to maximize their rotation, because I know it's very hard and it is extremely crucial to dancing well and having good technique. So today I'm going to give my best crack at this. I, to be honest, have been quite daunted to make this video because I really want to do my best in drawing upon my knowledge of taking kinesiology classes for a year at the University of Utah, and just using everything I learned there, everything I learned throughout my, 16, 17 years of dancing, and also my experience at Houston Ballet. I had a teacher who really helped to get me started on the road to using my rotation, and she really helped to describe the total body alignment that I should have in order to use my rotation to the best of my abilities. So I'm going to draw from all those resources that I have and also use some images in this video to help you guys understand. And the first thing I will say is that turnout obviously comes from the hips. Almost everyone has teachers that say turnout comes from the hips. I heard this 20,000 times before I even felt like I started to understand the truth about how to use my turnout and actually maintain it. However, I just feel like that is the most useless statement unless you actually describe to your students how does the hip turn out on its own to make my whole leg turn out. Like, what makes that happen? I think a lot of teachers out there do not delve into the muscular mechanics of rotation and the anatomy of it to actually help the students make it happen. A lot of teachers describe what alignment students' bones should be in, so students more or less have an understanding of what the visual effect is and what the end result should be like and where their bones should be placed, but they have no idea how to use certain muscle groups in a way that is efficient and actually effective for using rotation. This was certainly my case, and when I finally started to understand how to use my muscles, I actually didn't understand that there's a way to go about using certain muscle groups that doesn't involve gripping the muscles in order to put the bones in a certain position that it's turned out, but like it's a soft engagement that you're able to maintain. It's kind of like if you're able to hold a fist like really, really tight, as hard as you can't hold that for very long before you tense up. It's kind of like you want, I'm just using this example and saying you should apply this to the certain muscle groups I will describe to hold your rotation. You should be able to just hold the body part in a certain position, like the hand, hold it enough to where you can maintain the position but not exhaust yourself, build up lactic acid, and create such intense knots in your muscles that you are then imbalanced and injured. So today I'm going to try to describe what muscle groups you should target, how you should feel energetically to help your muscle memory get established, and just generally tips on how to better understand where turnout actually comes from. So the first visual I'm going to put up is just one of the pelvis, and I want you to understand the bony landmarks, so to speak, that you should kind of be aware of so that it's a helpful tool for you to keep checking on yourself throughout class to see if they're in a certain alignment. The first one is up there at the top of the pelvis where it says the iliac crest. The very front of that is the point that is called the anterior superior iliac spine. That's what it is. There we go. Sorry, it's been like 2 years since I've done this. But for short, it's the ASIS. Basically, it is what most dancers are able to point to and say, that's my hip bone, you know, the two bones at the top lateral portion of your hip that often protrude. And by lateral, I mean outside. Medial is inside in scientific terms, I suppose. So yes, those are the ASIS, or the hip bones. And then also you should know the sits bones, or the ischial tuberosities, so they're called, which most people are very aware of what that is, especially if you are pretty thin. Oftentimes you feel those when you sit down and your butt gets a little bit numb. So those are the very bottom-most points of your pelvis that you sit on, so sits bones. And also, this isn't really pictured in this image, but you should know about the basically where the pubis symphysis is, which is kind of where your crotch bone is. It's kind of gross to say that, but you should be able to use the 3 points at the front of your pelvis, the bony landmarks, so to speak, to make sure that they line up in the same plane. So if I were to stand up and turn to the side, I could put both of my fingers on my hip bones, or the ASIS, and notice that they are in the same line as the pubis symphysis, or crotch bone. I really hate saying that. Ugh. Anyway, so that the front of your pelvis is flat. That is really important for creating the right posture, and I will now put up another image of the correct posture that you should have in your pelvis, by using your abs and all that, and also in your spine, to make sure that your pelvis is in the proper placement so that you can best access your rotation. Because yes, as I said, and many teachers say, turnout does come from the hips, but I'm trying to describe how this actually happens and all that. So know that the curvature of the spine should not be totally eliminated in ballet, which I find schools like the Russian School of Thought and all that, they often try to make the dancer's back really flat and you have like totally straight posture, you know. That's not exactly how it should be, and actually that's very unhealthy for the spine. You should have a bit of a natural curvature in your spine. The spine should also be elongated and straight enough to where like I said, the 3 points on the front of the pelvis should be complete, or as flat as possible, rather than like the image where the girl's in the pink leotard, her hip bones are completely tilted forward and her sits bones at the bottom, or the ischial tuberosities, are completely pointing in a diagonal rather than straight down. That's the reason I wanted you to acknowledge the bony landmarks that are the sits bones, because when you plie, or really at any point other than when you're in arabesque, your sits bones shouldn't be pointing forward like you're tucking your pelvis, and they shouldn't be pointing back as if you are tilting your pelvis forward, but they should more or less be pointing pretty straight down. And that's going to help you with your alignment and turnout when you plie, as well as when you're just standing straight up. So now that you understand what posture your bones should be in the back and in the pelvis, I think it's pretty obvious, as many teachers out there say, that as far as your legs go, the knees should be pointed to the side. I have a few images here that demonstrate a proper position in first position. So the knees are pointing out to the side, not forward, and the calves are also rotating. The entire leg is rotating down to the ankles, but not rotating out of alignment. So what I'm saying is that from the top of the leg to the bottom of the leg, every joint, every bone should be at the same degree of rotation as is coming from your hip. So if your femur or your thigh bone is only rotating so much, your tibia or your shin bone shouldn't be rotating more than that, and your ankle should definitely not be rotating more than that, because that is what happens when people roll in on their arches and push their knees forward out of alignment or pronate. And that's where injuries really happen. Let me tell you, I know from experience. Also, as you know, the arches should be lifted. Your feet should look the same when you're standing, well, ideally in parallel, not trying to rotate at all. And also when you are in a position that is turned out, the bones in the feet should not be collapsing at all. They shouldn't be squishing at all, rotating in any sort of strange way or coming out of alignment that is unnatural or creates any sort of tension or force on certain bones and muscles that are going to be important for you to keep healthy throughout your dance career. Obviously, a lot of you guys are pretty familiar with what it should not look like when you rotate, but here's an image anyway. This girl is trying very hard to make her first position completely flat. I want you to know that that is not necessary at all if you want to dance well or have a career in ballet. It's actually really not a very useful position unless you are just that gifted and that turned out from birth. So as you see, she has a little bit of a bunion going on. She's rolling or pronating on her foot and creating a lot of tension in her ankle, and she's going to feel that tension all the way up her leg. A lot of times when people pronate or roll inwardly like that, they feel a lot of tension or tendinitis, people think, in their peroneal muscles, which are the muscles on the outside of the calf, and the ankles can get locked up. It's just really not a good situation, and I think you guys are pretty clear if you've danced before as to why that's not a good thing, because if you do this, you'll feel it. Alright, so now I think we've kind of covered adequately where the bones should be in a turned out position as far as like placement and all that. Now, the most important thing that we'll discuss is the muscles. Which muscle groups should you really focus your energy on to maintain rotation and create a very nice visual effect that is useful to you, build strength, and just generally helps your technique to improve and solidify as you practice this proper way of rotating. So to start off pretty basically, I'll show you this image that I found, which describes pretty well the energetic flow that you should feel in your body when you're really lifted and maintaining your rotation in a way that doesn't bulk up your muscles and increase tightness in areas that are really not necessary to grip. So it comes from the top down. The shoulders are down, she's feeling an expansion in her chest, her abdominals are lifting up, and also her rib cage is closed, not gripped tight and closed in, but as if she's exhaling, the ribs are coming in and they're not flared out. And that'll also help when you maintain an engagement in your transverse abdominis or your abs. Her thighs are rotated out, but she's not just thinking about that from the hips, but it's as if the adductors or the inner thigh muscles are turning themselves out. When you also do that, you're supposed to be thinking of the outside of your quad turning towards the back. You should see a flattening in the front of the thigh, and you should feel your entire thigh, especially the outside, rolling towards the back. That sounds really gross, but energetically that's what you should feel. And at the same time as they're rolling outwards and each leg is rotating away from the other, the quads are pulling up, not in a gripped way, but just so that the kneecaps are engaged and the leg is fully straightened. But in order to do this, you don't have to fully use 100% of your energy to grip your quad. You should find that when you're rotating properly, your knees should straighten quite easily. Now the most important part is discussing how the glutes help to accomplish rotation in the hips. Because the hips don't just rotate on their own. It's not just the bones that, go in a certain place. The bones don't accomplish actions, your muscles do. That's what gets the job done, as you know. And I found that this image here is pretty useful in describing or showing you the way that your glutes should look whenever you're rotating and using them properly to turn out. So the muscles in your glutes are what actually accomplish a majority of the rotation in the hip. So your gluteus maximus, which is the big glute muscle, that's going to engage to help pull the entire pelvis down. And almost you should be feeling an engagement in your hamstrings and your glutes to kind of connect them. Energetically, they should feel connected. And I'm sorry, I know this is a lot of information, but that's another sensation that's really not talked about, that you can actually engage your hamstrings and your glutes in a way that sorry, there's a hair on my arm, that can pull the pelvis into proper alignment from the back, not just pulling up the abs and everything from the front and trying to get proper pelvic placement, but thinking of the energy going up in the front and down in the back so that your pelvis is in a very neutral alignment. Also, I found, just as a side note, for years I struggled with engaging my quads way too much to have straight legs, and trying to rotate a lot from the front of my leg and not just the hips. So I was using the glutes a lot, but I was also using my quads a lot to accomplish all of the movement. And recently I realized that I can actually use my hamstrings for a lot. And I really encourage you guys to experiment and try this feeling out for yourselves, that when you are, for instance, in a tendu, this is the best place at the beginning of class to feel this. When you're extending your leg out, obviously you should be using your quad to have a straight leg that's also rotated. But when you're coming in, think of not just slamming your foot into fifth position or whatever, but using your hamstring and the gravity of just coming from a position that is out to in, using that hamstring to keep the leg straight. And it actually helps a lot with dynamics and musicality of achieving that like quick in accented quick tendus or anything like that. So think of when you're extending your legs out in any position, yes, you will use the quads, but also you can maintain an engagement of the hamstrings, that when you're coming back in, you just engage the hamstring a little more, and that'll help you to pull your legs in really quickly while keeping straight legs and not looking like you're gripping the quad too much, or this will just help you with when your teachers say things like, you're not using the backs of your legs enough. That's really going to help. So I hope that made sense to you guys. I don't know. Just try that out for yourselves and see if it helps you. So anyway, back to this image. There is a little word here. It says crease, and it's all, exclamation point, because yes, this is very important. As my teacher at Houston Ballet liked to say, you have to have a cut butt. So yes, there's a crease between the thigh and the glutes, because there are actually 6 muscles, the 6 deep outer rotators, outer deep 6 rotators, yeah, that's what it is, in your glutes at the very back, and they're like the innermost layer of muscles between the layer, or under the layers of glute muscles that you have on your bottom. And those are what actually pull the femur back and rotate it outwards. So obviously, like I said, they're really deep in there, so it's hard to feel. But if you just work with isolating your leg rotation, just, practicing on your own, kind of workshopping these ideas, you can feel them working. And the more that you start to feel those subtle muscles doing the rotating of the leg from the back, it'll really help alleviate tension in the quad. And you'll also learn to stop having to engage, or how to stop engaging the superficial or outermost layers of the glute muscles, like the big gluteus maximus, so much to accomplish the rotation, because in the end that doesn't really serve you as much as isolating those outer deep 6 rotators. And you can feel this when you do like the clamshell exercise from Pilates. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. If you practice clamshells frequently enough in a neutral pelvic alignment, just lying on your side, it'll really help you to find those muscles and actually start to see that visible crease that you have when you're rotating properly from your leg. So as you can see in this image, it's kind of describing with the arrows what you should be feeling energetically. But most importantly, you can see that she's rotating properly because she has the crease and she's using her glutes to keep her legs rotated and together. And also this is helping to keep her pelvis in proper alignment. So that's what the top of the leg should look like. And here's another image as well that describes total body alignment. It's really helpful. As you can see, the good posture image on the left, this person has some curvature to their spine, and also the bony landmarks or the points on the front of their pelvis are pretty much in line. So that is really going to help you no matter what position you're in ballet, unless it's like arabesque or some very open position like a développé or grand jeté or something like that. You're not going to want like a straight pelvis, but in almost every other position you should really be thinking about that, really standing tall on that standing leg and really feeling like, especially when you're standing on one leg, the glutes, like you're really feeling a lift from the bottom of your rear and your hamstring, and it's like lifting your entire body. So yeah, instead of standing on your leg and sinking on it and having your, like say this part of my shoulder is my pelvis and this is my femur. The femur shouldn't go up in the hip and have the hip sinking like that and the entire body sinking, especially when you're standing on one leg. You should still maintain that lift in that position of like almost your leg pulling out of the socket because you're so tall, even when you're not standing on two legs. You shouldn't be sinking, and that really happens when you maintain a lift in the glutes and in the hamstrings, and just feel like from the back of your body that you're almost being pushed up taller, and that's really going to help you to stabilize your entire body and maintain your rotation. So to go back and reiterate, I just want to point out the most important things you should know. First, after understanding how to muscularly make this happen, always make sure in ballet class that your lower abs are engaged, that your glutes are engaged, your hamstrings, everything that needs to engage is doing what it needs to do in order to keep that pelvis neutral and lifted up, not sinking forward. The image of the girl in the pink and also in the green leotard, I think, is the most helpful thing. Do not be the girl in the pink leotard. I see this so frequently. Oftentimes when people dance like this, which is extremely common, even people on like a professional level, sometimes like they dance, not that exaggerated, but they kind of have that. Because a lot of people who are naturally rotated especially can still have rotation in their legs while having a pelvis that is tilted forward, even though it's not really proper technique. Okay, that's my cat Alice. So just remember, especially, well, this is for everyone, but especially if you are struggling with turnout, this posture will not serve you. It will not serve you for building strength, for getting elevation and jumps. You'll be more injury prone. You won't be able to hold as much rotation. Like, it is absolutely crucial that you work on maintaining this pelvic alignment. And definitely do not tuck. Don't go the other way, because that's going to really build up a lot of muscles. And oftentimes that involves a lot of gripping and muscle memory that is very, very hard to erase. Believe me, I know from experience. I also found another image that will be pretty helpful in summing this up. Even though this girl is in parallel, I just want you to notice how lifted she is in her lower abs, and the crease that you could see in her glutes. Her hamstrings are obviously working. You could see the side of her thigh has some definition because she also uses that to rotate. And actually, even though she is in parallel, she is engaging the muscles that she will use later to turn out. So I encourage you to practice this feeling of using those muscles in parallel and in turnout when you're trying this. Actually, one huge thing that I actually just failed to mention is that in order to turn out properly, you need to have your weight forward. Notice in the image of the girl standing in parallel, her weight is actually placed pretty far forward, not completely over the front of her toes, but towards the front of her foot. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before. But it's really important to practice this not only in parallel, but in turnout, and not just when you're standing on one leg either, because then I think a lot of teachers say like, oh yeah, weight over the ball of the foot and stuff like that. But you will only accomplish this in a proper way if you think of taking your whole pelvis and putting it in that place, not just the front of the body, not just taking your whole body in improper alignment and then just tilting it forward like that. Think of the torso and the pelvis as one unit, and it's just shifting over that part of the foot in order to maintain the proper alignment. Really having your weight forward like that really helps you to maintain your balance, build strength, and just access your rotation and be able to transition very easily into other positions, other movements, other directions. That is one thing that you'll notice that professionals do very different from students. They're not sitting back, because actually when you sit back, a lot of times your weight is on your heels and your legs want to rotate in. Trust me on this one. The more you put your body forward, the more your heels, if you're using the right muscles, will come forward with you. So please remember that. Okay, so I think I beat all this to a pulp. I think I've talked for a long time, and now I'm going to try and edit this puppy and really hope that it makes sense. Please make sure to shoot me any questions if you have them in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Bye!